Chapter 2, Part 2.
Awakening.
Every night was spent nearly sleepless for the week and a half I had been awake. I was lucky if I got a couple of hours on that damn couch, and although everyone mostly stayed in their rooms, I would hear Karri getting up at least once a night to walk the halls and grab a drink. I wouldn't even have known it was her if it weren't for her coming in while she thought I was sleeping. Every so often, she would notice I was awake and come sit down for a bit. Tonight was one of those nights.
Are you still awake?
The voice was quiet, trying not to wake me up if I had already fallen asleep. She was in the doorway, blanket wrapped around her, hair pulled up in a messy bun. It was too long and too red. I wasn't exactly the one to judge her for odd hair. Mine was growing out decently now, and I had cut out most of the black. It was shorter than it usually was, but I knew it would grow in quickly. She looked like a lost puppy at the moment, and something in me made me feel like I needed to look after her. I sat up on the couch, scooching over to make room for her. Blanket wrapped around myself. I hadn't had the chance to grab a suitcase or a bag like they had, and we hadn't had the chance to stop and land. I had managed to find some old spare clothing that had been abandoned with the ship, but I tried to only wear that when mine was needing washing. "I'm awake. Come sit," I told her. It was just becoming normal to sit like this, sometimes in silence, just being there while the other couldn't sleep. "What's been keeping you up?" She walked to the couch and sat down, pulling her legs into her chest and covering them with her blanket. She rested her chin on her knees.
I'm in a new place. It's kind of terrifying.
"You're telling me. At least you knew you were coming here." It was meant to sound funny, but the truth always came across a bit too harsh. I could almost sense her rolling her eyes in the darkness.
Are you gonna leave when we land for fuel?
I had thought a lot about it in the time I had been on board. They were even talking about landing soon. Every time I thought about it, I was conflicted. Sure, I had wanted the normal kind of adventure that didn't involve war and death, but they were very careful about not hurting anyone. It was also an adventure I hadn't had before, and that was great. Yet, something in the back of my mind reminded me how wrong it was to be sitting here in the dark with Karri Ryder. Even just to be talking to her like this? Hell, I was in underwear and an undershirt. A blanket didn't change that. It should have been way more awkward than it was. However, despite that feeling in the back of my mind, sitting there felt right. It was driving me nuts, wondering if I had known her, wondering if it was time to go back so I could remember. There was always the chance I had never known her, that she just reminded me of someone I used to know.
Rayner?
She asked, reminding me I had been silent in my own thoughts for some time. I looked up at her. She had turned her head to watch me. In these moments, she was so quiet and peaceful, even though she was almost pure chaos most of the time. I smiled at her before speaking. "Honestly," I started, and she nodded slightly in acknowledgement. "I haven't decided yet. There's a lot to consider." She was silent at that, so I decided to continue. "If it helps you guys plan, I'm leaning towards staying here." She smiled back at me when I spoke, looking quite a bit more calm at that. I wasn't even sure if it was me staying or just having an answer that wasn't, I don't know. Either way, she was glad, and part of me was glad for that. The moonlight was coming in through the windows, closer with how high we actually were. Her hair almost glowed in the light, and I found myself staring. I shook my head and looked down to the floor. "Why me?" I asked quietly. She shuffled slightly, and by the movement I saw out of the corner of my eye, I knew she had turned to face me. Her voice was quiet when she spoke.
Would you feel better if I told you I really don't know?
Not really. There has to be a reason. I turned my head slightly to look at her before looking back down. You picked me for a reason. I just want to know. She sighed deeply.
I wish I had an answer for you, but I just went off a strong gut feeling. Was I wrong? No, you're exactly what we needed. You know this ship like the back of your hand already, and you picked up on everything quickly.
I laughed at that. I don't think you made the choice you think you made. I almost wished in that moment that she knew everything. Where I was from, who I was, and why I knew about this ship so well. I wished I could tell her that they were in danger simply having me on this ship. Yet, I bit back the words. She didn't know anything, and she was so young. There was a strong chance she wouldn't understand. She leaned forward towards me, putting her hand on my wrist.
Then tell me what choice you think I made.
It was compelling, but I knew better. Too many times I had let people in the past, only to be burned for telling them too much. Not today, Karri. You should try and get some sleep. She scoffed at me.
Like I'll be able to sleep. Are you just trying to get rid of me?
No, but Slade will get rid of me if you stay in here all night. She didn't respond to that. She knew it was entirely true. I barely heard the laugh from her, but it was there.
Can I stay a bit longer, or do you want to try and sleep?
I watched her as she leaned back against the couch and put her arms behind her head so casually. She had no idea who or what she was sitting next to, and it was easier that way. I had been watching her, though, as well as how she and Slade interacted. There was more to this than they were letting on, even if it was just something about her past that made him so protective. You can stay, I told her. As much as I wanted her to go, as much as I wanted to avoid whatever it was about her that I couldn't seem to get away from. She was there, and I wasn't going to force her to leave when she felt so safe. We sat in silence for what felt like hours, only occasionally bringing up something small. She talked about what she remembered from her life before. A mom who had been controlling and crazy. It seemed to fit in with what Slade had said about their mom. It seemed almost wonderful that she didn't remember much about her, even less so about her dad. Then she asked,
What about you? What's your family like?
I didn't even know where to start, or even if I should tell her. Yet, I couldn't seem to stop myself once I spoke even a bit. I have a brother, Jake. He's younger by quite a bit, and last I saw him, he was going through some stuff. I couldn't even remember what he had been going through, and that was just a tell that I had stayed away too long. Our dad was never around much. We were raised by our grandma. My mom? Well, Jake never knew her.
Why?
She asked, and I shook my head. As much as I wanted to talk about it, it was too complicated. A simple answer, something not telling. She got sick. She's gone now. It wasn't a lie. In a way, she had gotten sick, and it was always my go-to answer when someone asked about her.
Oh, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have pried.
She whispered. It was the first time I had ever heard her feel bad for something. She really was a different person one-on-one than she was in a group. At least she was different talking to me alone. It all still hurt, even though it had been so damn long ago. almost felt as if it were lifetimes ago. Jake had been just an infant at that time, and I had been a bit older. He had no memories of our mother, and that was always a hard thing for him to talk about. One day, he would know the whole story. For now, though, it was easier to keep him in the dark. It was a long time ago, I informed her.
What about your dad?
She wondered.
I don't know anything about mine.
My dad? I chuckled dryly. I haven't seen him in a long time now. He's never approved of me or my brother, and well, he's not a good man. She was curious, and as long as I didn't say too much, it wasn't bad for her to know. I'd rather not get into that, if it's all right. She didn't comment on that subject again.
You said you were raised by your grandma. What's she like?
That question was something I could answer without worry. That woman was the one person who had always believed in us, even when we didn't believe in ourselves. She raised us. My brother still lives with her as far as I know. She's the kindest woman you would ever meet, but sometimes she knows far too much. I couldn't help but laugh, thinking of all the times she had known exactly what I needed before I even knew. It made her very good at raising my brother and I. He was always a bit quiet, but I got up to way more than I should have. I couldn't help but miss them. But no, it wasn't safe for me to go there right now. I wasn't sure when it would be, or if it ever would. Part of me wished I could just stay there sometimes, but I knew I wouldn't trade this life, even though it meant more loss than I could have imagined. She understood my silence and got to her feet.
I should get to bed before Slade wakes up.
I turned to look out the window and realized it was lighter now, still not daytime.
Listen, I know we haven't made the most welcoming place for you, but you're welcome to stay. I think I'd miss these late nights, to be honest.
She walked out then, and my eyes followed her until she was out of view. Covering my face with my hands, I sighed deeply. Don't. You're just going to get hurt, I muttered, remembering every time in the past. Don't let her close. My mind was telling me to stay away. Every part of me knew I couldn't let someone else in. Gabby was making that difficult enough. Yet, she was hard to stay away from for some reason. Karri Ryder. Somehow she just seemed familiar, like I knew her from a distant memory. It made no sense, but yet here I was conflicted about it. I needed to stay away. That particular thought lasted throughout the next few days, but was always broken at night when she came to talk to me. I wasn't sure how she was lasting without passing out, but she was managing somehow. Even I was getting exhausted at this point from being unable to fall asleep. You shouldn't keep coming here. It's not a good idea, I whispered to her as she sat on the couch one night, her eyes drifting shut.
I do what I want,
Was her tired and mumbled response. I couldn't help but grin. Even like this, she was still herself.
Besides, it's not like I'm going to sleep anyways. Might as well have some company while I'm up.
She was exhausted, and even she wouldn't admit she needed to sleep. Karri, you're barely staying awake. Don't tell me you won't sleep.
I won't. The second I go back, I'll be tossing and turning, and I won't be able to fall asleep, and I'll come back out and keep you awake anyways.
I knew I wasn't going to get any sleep to begin with, so having her here wasn't inconvenience me at all. She seemed to think otherwise, though, which I found hilarious.
So I might as well just stay here.
You're impossible, was all I muttered. You can't fall asleep out here. Slade already doesn't want me here. Finding you asleep out here will make him go feral. It was more of the matter that he would be pissed. I didn't care if she slept on the couch, really, as long as she got some kind of sleep. She had been walking around like a zombie for days now, and as much as I appreciated our nighttime chats, I was feeling even more exhausted just watching her. She just shook her head.
I'll just stay for a bit and I'll go back to my room.
There was no arguing with her. Partially because she was stubborn, and also because I could tell she had fallen asleep after those words came out of her. Really? You've already kidnapped me, and now you're going to be the reason Slade tries to kill me? You're definitely not making it easy for me to fit in here, Karri. I knew she wouldn't hear it. She was already out. I laid down myself, one knee bent so my foot wasn't disturbing her, the other leg draped off the side of the couch. I threw the blanket over myself. She was wrapped in her own, as she always was when she came to the couch. I wasn't able to wake her up and bring her to her room. She wouldn't have been able to sleep there anyways, and there was a couple of weeks' worth of evidence towards that. Although she was asleep, it looked like an uncomfortable position to be in. With a deep sigh, I sat up partially and pulled her over to me, letting her rest against me. I knew none of this was a good idea, that I should have run away quickly and not returned. Karri Ryder was going to be the thing that made me break my promise to myself to not get attached. Yet, as she slept against me, I smiled. As much as I wanted to sleep, I also wanted to just be there for a few moments. I knew it was wrong. The voice in the back of my mind hadn't silenced from having her lay there. There was still the thought that I was doing something terrible. She was so back and forth with me. One minute she was happy and talking, the next she wouldn't even look at me. It was the same way I felt, like there was a hidden force between us, shouting that we couldn't be close. I wondered if she felt that way, or if she was just always so conflicted with everyone. Yet as I slept, I had a strong feeling, despite every thought going through my mind, I would do what it took to protect her. And I had the aching feeling that in my past I had done just that, even if neither of us remembered one another. The door slid open quietly, and I watched as Blazer entered the room. He walked to the kitchen to grab a glass of water, then attempted to leave quietly. It took him a minute to realize I was awake, and he looked at Karri, who was laying on me sleeping. He pointed a finger at her, mouth open slightly in surprise. "I thought you guys didn't get along," he whispered, but it was almost a stage whisper, loud. I lifted my hand, pressing a finger to my lips to hush him. "She hasn't been sleeping. Don't worry about it, Blazer. Go to bed." There was a grin on his face as he backed out of the room, looking from me to her and pointing. Of course, he would be the one to jump to conclusions. I removed my finger from my mouth as he exited the room and wrapped my arms around her. If she was going to be there anyways, if I was going to let myself get into this sort of trouble, at least I could do it properly. I expected to be awake all night, as I normally was, but there was something about having her there, something about knowing she was safe right here that made me relax significantly. It was going to drive me nuts not knowing. There was no way I could have met her before this and not known, unless she had been from back home. Yet, if she had, there would have been some way to tell by now. It wasn't even half an hour later when I faded into sleep. It was unexpected, but it felt so damn good to finally be able to get some rest, even if Slade was going to tear into me in that morning.
I was like dying for that whole last page, like hearing them come to life. That was amazing.
Good, I'm so glad.
Oh my god, my heart.